Welcome to the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels that they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Amy Swift, who is the Deputy Chief Medical Officer at Silver Hill Hospital, where she oversees inpatient services, working closely with nursing, social work, psychology, and other disciplines to establish the highest level of care for patients and their families. She specializes in addiction psychiatry with nearly 2 decades of research and clinical experience, and she's deeply devoted to understanding and treating the most complex use disorder cases, which becomes very obvious and apparent during our conversation today. Prior to her current role at Silver Hill Hospital, Dr. Swift was the medical director of addiction services at Mount Sinai Beth Israel Hospital in Manhattan, where she oversaw the daily operations and performance of the clinical staff as well as the development and quality assurance of the hospital's programming. Prior to becoming medical director, Dr. Swift served as unit chief of the dual diagnosis inpatient psychiatry unit, program director of the Addiction Psychiatry Fellowship, and physician in charge of the Addiction Outpatient Clinic. Dr. Swift was a principal investigator of a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA, grant that developed an integrated training program to provide medical students at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai foundational training in medication-assisted treatment, or MAT, of opioid addiction. In 2019, she received the Cynthia Zarinsky Research Mentorship Award, honoring her accomplishments as an esteemed educator. Dr. Swift has published and presented extensively in addiction psychiatry and related fields. And without further ado, here is the wide-ranging conversation with Dr. Swift. Maybe kick us off with, first of all, what is Silver Hill? And what is the work that you do? Do you have an area of kind of expertise or focus, and how do you approach the recovery process? And then I want to dig into your background a little bit more and understand the motivation for how you found yourself doing the work that you're doing now. So I'll turn it over to you and just kind of start off with, can you give a picture of the work that Silver Hill does?
Of course. So Silver Hill is a freestanding psychiatric hospital in the middle of a residential neighborhood in New Canaan, Connecticut. And it's a beautiful campus. It's 44 acres of honestly stunning kind of backdrop of flowers and changing leaves in the fall. And it is a picture of healing. But what we actually do here is a bunch of different things. We have varying levels of care. So we can treat anybody kind of with the varying levels of symptoms that they bring to us. So we have inpatient care for people that really need a contained setting. They're either unsafe to be in the community or they need a medically supervised setting to detox. And so we have adult inpatient, and then we also actually have adolescent inpatient, kids from age 13 to 18. Then we also have these residential houses where we have different programs for people that are struggling with different sets of symptoms, one of them being our Scavetta House, which is focused on substance use. But those are at least 4-week programs where people are able to engage in dense therapeutic work to build the skills to get back out into the world. And then we also have an outpatient, intensive outpatient program for adolescents, for people that are struggling with mood and other, psychiatric disorders, and then also substance use.
Mm-hmm. Could you take a moment? It's been kind of talked about on this platform, but could you talk about the difference between inpatient and outpatient. You hit on it a little bit. Inpatient is like really more boxed in, contained.
Yes.
But could you just kind of give an overview maybe of like what does it mean to be an outpatient um, person in the EAR program?
So I'll start with the first question you asked, which is inpatient is our highest level, meaning that you are actually restricted in your movement around the campus. You are
Hmm.
restricted to the unit that you are assigned to. That doesn't mean that you aren't allowed outside at times. That's the beauty of being on a campus like this, that we
Yeah.
do have outdoor time for people that are appropriate. We actually do have a gym. We go on walks on our campus. And so there are a lot of opportunities that are afforded to patients that aren't typically afforded to other patients in other psychiatric inpatient settings. For outpatient, we have people that for our programs, we run intensive outpatient programs, which are typically 3 days a week. Some of our sections are 4 days a week, and they're 3 hours a day. So you come to the
Hmm.
campus from home for 3 hours a day. You engage in group therapy. You're there for consecutive hours, 9 to 12, or the ones that are in the afternoon. For the kids, we have them after school, and then you go home. The other level of care, the final one, is our residential programs, where it's kind of a meet in the middle, where you do live on our campus. You have, a key fob to get in and out of the house you're living in. You are
Hmm.
restricted to the campus, but you can move about the campus as you please. And you check in, every couple of hours. And then you go to the intensive programming, the group programming, primarily from 1 to 4 in the afternoon. But then there are some groups in the morning. There are some individual sessions in the morning for patients that struggle with addiction, recovery meetings at night. They may go in town to our early bird meeting first thing in the morning. So it is these different levels based on the need of the patient and the safety profile.
And when a patient approaches you, whether it's them coming to you or a family member bringing them forward, who's making the decision or delineation on, oh, you belong in this track or program in particular?
It's a shared decision with
Okay.
a couple of caveats. Meaning, when the role I have, I kind of oversee a lot here, but sometimes I do
Hmm.
admission. Sometimes I'll sit with people as they come in. For our process, we have an incredible way that we go about bringing people into the system where we pre-screen them. And so they've already had a conversation with a member of our admissions team, gone over their history, gone over their symptoms, and been given some guidance about what might be recommended. But the final decision is made when they come into our admissions department. They sit down with us, as the physician, and there's a nurse there, and there's a social worker, and we all talk together about
Okay.
what might fit.
What is the experience like with individuals who are brought there by, say, like a caring and trusting family member or friend when the willingness and desire might not be 100 or might not feel like 100% of the patient's decision or not decision, frame of mind. And I'll inject my experience. I tell people the most fearful I have ever been. I walked through the doors of rehab, quote unquote, under my own power and
Right.
decision. I needed I needed my wife there beside me. I have never been so fearful in my life as I was walking through the doors of rehab because I didn't know what was on the other side. And I with certainty could not have done it alone. So how do you handle those situations when it's a family member who is really doing what seems like the majority of the work in lifting and carrying someone through those front doors?
Well, Kyle, I wish that it was the other way around, but it's almost always that is the scenario.
Hmm.
It is
Yeah.
very rarely a patient's coming to me of their own free will, they're by themselves saying, I am ready to do this. It
Hmm.
is more often a family member is there with them. The patient may even be a little intoxicated because they couldn't
Yes.
yet muster up the, willpower to get in there sober.
Yeah.
And it's really about biting little chunks that they can chew, right? Like somebody coming in for rehab, I can't have the conversation about the next 28 days. That feels horrific, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about how we're even going to get from the admissions building to the unit they're going to, because
Yep.
that is an achievable goal.
Hmm.
So there are a couple of things that we could do. One, we demystify it, make sure that they have the opportunity to ask all the logistical questions, right? So that there are the least surprises possible.
Hmm.
Two, I give them options about what I can offer them. Here are the things you might struggle with. Early abstinence, you're going to struggle with sleep. Is that something that's going to be a concern for you? Should we address that, right? So it's things that they feel like they are the whole person is being taken into consideration. And it's not just, okay, we're going to deal with your alcohol use, right? Like the alcohol use doesn't exist in a vacuum. And then 3, I oftentimes have to triangulate the person in the room to use them. My medical recommendation is going to be the thing that is going to help the person, but their buy-in is going to be based on the loved one with them. So the loved one isn't recommending the treatment. I'm recommending what the treatment is. The loved one is encouraging the agreement to try it. So it really is about helping the person understand that I see it. There is no, I'm not there. The expectation doesn't exist that this person wants to be there. I know they don't want to be there. I know there's some part of them, there is some ambivalence, but I know by and large they do not want to be there. So I have to meet them where they're at and develop a conversation where I can find some opportunity for them to see a positive outcome here. But oftentimes I tell them, I'm like, listen, I'll hold the hope for right now. I know we can get through this. You'll meet me there somewhere. But I know you don't have to see it yet to start.
Yeah. And just to kind of drive that point home, again, just speaking from my experience in the early days of, well, I should say at the end of my time drinking, I think this sounds crazy. I get self-conscious about saying some of these things because it's like, I still find myself wondering, like, if I have to be the only person so crazy to think this, but I know I'm not. And so I kind of have gotten better at working through it, but I feel like I still caveat those things. To me, honestly, death seemed more reasonable and approachable to me than going to rehab or even going to an AA meeting. And I think, in my time, like reflecting back on it, that just shows how truly lost that I was. It felt like, I tell people, it felt like I had a huge list of ways that I had experimented and tested to try to rid myself of the insanity and the madness and of the urges and desires to drink. And I had so many things crossed off that I would hear on podcasts where it's like, whoa, this really helps, like regulate all your dopamine levels and like you'll feel great after doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, I tried that, but I still got the pull. I had the pull to drink. And it's like that list had so many experiments crossed off. And at the end, it truly felt like it was just death remaining. And honestly, I got so lucky that that wasn't the end of my story and that I was able to find my way through the doors of rehab. But again, there was that fear of the unknown because I was convinced that this wouldn't work for me. One thing that really stands out about Silver Hill in looking kind of on your programming and online content, can you talk through how it's not just the addict working through the process and the healing? Like, how do you guys approach that integrated family care through the recovery process?
So that's something that I think one of the, the kind of preparation questions that you'd sent is like, what else can we do besides traditional things? And
yes,
for family, this is, I can't fix a car and send it back to somebody that doesn't know how to drive. That's not useful, right? So like a perfectly fixed up machine sitting in your driveway that you don't know how to operate doesn't work. So there are a couple of things we do. One, whatever I offer to the patient themselves, I also explain to the family, because there has to be a shared understanding of why I'm offering what I'm offering, because the conversation doesn't stop with me, right? Those conversations you have with your physician, you're going to go back later and you're going to talk to your wife about, or later, 3 years down the line when somebody approaches you and is like, why did you choose to be on naltrexone? Or why did you take antabuse? You want to have content to be able to explain it. So involving the family early is important. Acknowledging the trauma of having a loved one with a substance use disorder is incredibly important. I say this to people all the time. The shame that the patient themselves is going to experience with all that has happened is one thing, but also the way that the family system is going to need to rebuild around how that person still has to be built up as worth something, but also that they have to not weaponize that in the future is important. So it all has to be put out on the table and discussed.
Yeah. I'm speaking with much less experience and data to go off of, but I've been living in what I would call active recovery for 2.5 years. one of the things I really like doing is going back to my rehab clinic and speaking. Every week they have an alumni guest share their story. It's been really meaningful and helpful, selfishly helpful to me, but also to the group that's there at the time to share, for me to share my story. But one of the things that I tell them that surprised me and I learned through my own experience and watching others is one of the hardest things about exiting the rehab experience and integrating back into the world and finding yourself in long-term recovery is understanding that the relationships are probably going to be the most difficult thing to manage. For me, it's been above and beyond. I haven't had urges or desires to drink when those, what I would call like the addictive thought patterns start coming back into my mind is when I have some disruption with a very meaningful and important relationship. In working the steps, it's like you do steps 8 and 9 and you genuinely apologize. That moment when you don't necessarily receive the forgiveness that you're hopeful to get, and you realize that, whoa, this relationship, to get it back to where I want it, or to get it to where I want it, is going to take a lot of work. I've watched friends relapse because of that, because the support really wasn't there or what they expected. So I guess looking at that, say 4-week experience, what are some of the things that tools, tricks, or just insights that you're giving to the families and to the addict as to like, hey, how do you guys come together and merge and be prepared for these difficulties that will crop up on day 29 or on day, honestly, like 2000, based on everything that I hear? Like, it's a continuous process.
So there are two things. One, we use a dialectical behavioral therapy model here, which has 4 kind of modules. One of them is interpersonal effectiveness, because as you described, that is the thing that when somebody improves their interactions in terms of the effectiveness they feel from them, there's less emotional reactivity that could cue an episode of looking for a distraction, right?
Yep.
And that's what alcohol is you're looking to take away the negative feelings in your mind, body, et cetera.
Right.
The other thing is a conversation I had with a patient this morning. The patient's family called me last night and was like, we just had the worst visit ever. She lost it on us. She yelled at us, this, that, and the other. And so I went and found her this morning and she looks at me and she's like, Dr. Swift, she's like, I blew up on my dad. And I said, good. She's like, what do you mean good? I said, good. I said, that was going to happen somewhere. I'm glad that it happened. Yeah. We were on this campus. Now we can process it and we can figure out how to work through it, because now you're teaching your brain that you had that blow up fight with your dad, but you didn't go to do something to distract from it. So now you're breaking cycles of patterns of behavior that were problematic before because of the setting you're in and the ability to use a tool now. So I do think that it is incredibly important to understand that distressing interactions are going to happen, and that to be mindful that when they do happen, and when they happen on this campus or when they happen when you're in treatment, that you bring it into the treatment room so that you could talk about it, you could process it, you can consolidate what you did well, and you can brainstorm how to improve in the future.
Yeah. I had an experience like that right before I left rehab, and I haven't shared it yet. And it is a little personal, but we had discharge plans that we put together. Write it out, think it through. What are you going to do to avoid those, or when you encounter those triggers, to avoid a relapse? Like what is your maintenance plan outside of these walls? Because honestly, I'll say it from my perspective, rehab was easy. There was, it was a chance to really reflect and work on yourself. And like, there were no real risks, at least where I was at. And so this discharge plan, I invested so much time. I talked about it with my best friend in rehab. We worked on it together. We were a part of each other's plans, right? Like, we were going to meet up and hold each other accountable to AA meetings. I thought, and I struggled with perfectionism. And honestly, it was one of the things that led me down the road of shame and the misery with drinking. But I felt like I had put a lot into this plan, and I decided to share it with my whole family. It was on a Zoom call, and there were so many questions because I had done sobriety before. I had been sober 3, 6, 9 months at a time, and I had committed to my family in the past that this is different every time along the way. And each time I went back to alcohol, and it was so fast that things were as bad as they were, if not worse. And so my family was nervous and skeptical, and they had a lot of questions. And we got done with that session, and the Zoom meeting shut down. I was there with my therapist, and I just put my head in my hands. And she said exactly what you said. Like, you need to be grateful that this is happening right now when you're in here. Go outside, process this, talk to others with it, understand your family's perspective, but don't let it hold you back from the work that you are ready to do once you leave. And the realization that I got was the only thing that is going to mend those relationships, and I have phenomenal relationships with my family right now. It's a thing I'm honestly most grateful for. The only thing I could do to progress was just focus on the day, stay in recovery that day, and let those other things come back over time. And be willing to let it take maybe years to come back. I think that's one of the things that's hard is, as a recovered addict, within the first 7 days, we feel phenomenal from a physical standpoint and sometimes from a mental standpoint. And we just want everyone to be on our level right away. And it's hard when you realize there's that gap. So anyway, I'm sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
on a race, would you like somebody to tell you that it was a 5K race when it's actually a marathon? No,
exactly.
you want to know it's a marathon, and you want to pace
Yes.
and you want to be ready, and they're going to be mile 8's going to be hard, mile 13's going to be hard, but you don't want to think you're running a 5K race and that it's going to be done.
Yeah. And I've just found, like, in reflecting on my own journey, it's like I had such an obsession over control. And so when it came to my discharge, when it came to my long-term recovery, I wanted everyone there. I wanted everyone important there, and at the level of, like, commitment and trust in myself. And I just had to realize, like, no, this is part of the work that goes on. So I think, looking at Silver Hill and just the approach, I think, honestly, that's probably one of the biggest gaps, that if someone comes to me and asks, like, what should I look for in a rehabilitation facility for my son, my brother, whatever, that's one of them. Like, how do they incorporate you into all of this?
Yeah, no, I think that it is really important. And that is one of the things that everybody here, we have a family week. Everybody gets family involvement if it's appropriate and if they consent to it. But it's something that we know universally is needed. Sometimes we will increase the contact with family, or we do have a director of family therapy. If that is something that is needed, we can layer on additional levels. But at baseline, everybody gets some family work.
What happens in the instance, and maybe it doesn't happen very often, but are there ever times when you can see from your position, like, the addict is, say, ready, is willing, but the family's not? Because that's another thing, is there's a lot of discomfort when there's change to one person in the relationship and the other person's not ready. They will actually, I've seen loved ones kind of sabotage the situation because they want to find themselves in the comfort, the familiar situation, which is like just a destructive life, but there's some level of comfort with it.
Well, there are two things that come to mind for me for this. One, I had this patient right when I first started, a young girl, 19, alcohol use disorder. And her parents were really discordant in the goal for her, and that her and I wanted abstinence. I can't prescribe it for everybody, but because she wanted it, I'm there with her. Her parents were like, why can't she just have one drink? Just, like, drink socially. And I was like, well, because she doesn't want that. I was like, she's a vegan. You guys are letting her choose what she eats, but you don't want to let her choose what she drinks. But it was so obvious that there was just, and I said to them, I said, listen, I can't tell her, I can't prescribe abstinence to her, but because that's what she wants, me, her parents, the treatment team, everybody together have to align with that goal. It's her goal to have. It's not ours. So I think that it's really important that we have to champion, me, the physician, has to be the voice with the patient of what is their goal.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, when you have the identified patient, there are always other things that come into the family system. And I also had a patient recently that it was, she was in care and she was the one with the identified use, but the loved one had a problem as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were doing a family meeting, and all of a sudden I realized that the questions seemed less about her and more about him. And so I said, listen, like, one of the things that I want you guys to understand is that we are talking about, Susie and the way her relationship with alcohol right now. But for Susie to have the best chance of success, we maybe should take a step back and look about the relationship in the home, how you guys
Mm-hmm.
spend time together, and just allowing for a conversation about the entire backdrop of what was going on in, Susie's life, because that was the piece. How is she going to stop drinking if he's drinking every night next to her? It's an
Right.
uphill battle.
Right.
So sometimes we do have to take a 10,000-foot view, and be
Mm-hmm.
transparent with them about it.
Yeah. No, that's the relation. Walking into rehab, it was like there was no way that was going to be such a monumental task. And I consider myself lucky that I had family that wanted involvement, wanted a continued relationship with me. And I think honestly, like, if there could be something that I connect anyone who's early in recovery with, it would be that. Like, the relationships truly will be the most difficult part of this, those meaningful relationships. And this is going to seem like maybe a stark change of direction, but what is it that ultimately motivated you to get into this line of work and to end up in the seat that you're sitting in right now?
When I first started, right out of college, I worked in a forensic unit, and I started there, and it was intense, and it was in the middle of New York City, and it
Hmm.
was dangerous. And what I started to see was that there is a subset of patients that are like the most dangerous, the most sick, the most scary, honestly. So I kind of like filed that away. Then I went to med school and I went to residency. In my second year, we do a rotation on what's called the dual diagnosis unit. So people that have diagnoses that are in the mental health realm and substance use. They were wild. It was, again, the most difficult patients to treat. Nobody wants to be on that unit. And I was like, oh, I want to be the doctor that can do it all. I never want to be the
Yeah.
one to refer to somebody else
Mhm.
to treat the patient in front of them. So I worked at it. And I did an addiction fellowship, and I got board certified in addiction. And I took over that unit, actually, and I was the unit chief for that unit. And then I was promoted to, I oversaw all of addiction for all of Mount Sinai, Beth Israel in Manhattan. So like all the services in that hospital related to addiction. And I became the doctor that you called when you couldn't, when the patient couldn't be managed by somebody else. So like, go get
Yeah.
Dr. Swift. And, you'd hear my heels clicking down the hall, and this 5'3" woman shows up, and they're like, when's he coming? And I'm like, no, I'm Dr. Swift. Sure. But it was just the desire to master treating anyone because I knew I could. And these
Hmm.
people are a tough group to want to help sometimes. Finding the
Yeah.
compassion for the addicted individual is not something that everybody can do. And I can do it. So I felt like I should.
Yeah. What I have a couple questions. The first one, what gave you the confidence that you could be the one to solve these cases or
So
to help?
it was my first year. My attending as a resident, kept assigning me to the most aggressive, huge men, violent. And I finally went up
Mm.
to him. I was like, "Are you trying to get me killed? Like, what's happening?" And he was like, "No." He was like, "Watch how they respond to you. They're not
Mhm.
threatened by you, so they
Mm.
listen to you." So I took that and I used it, and I kept consolidating the information that when I made a decision, made a recommendation, had an intervention, it worked. And I think it's honestly partly because my physical stature is small. So like I'm
Mhm.
good. You punch me, did you win? No, like I'm not the kingpin to take down, right?
Hmm.
But then I started to develop the skills, and the skills worked, and it reinforced that. So that's how the confidence compounded into just consistency.
Oh, that's incredible. And then the second question I had is, in addiction recovery, there is not a high percentage of long-term success. And so how do you, in that space, in that field, how do you keep yourself motivated when you are seeing on a daily, hourly basis so much of the hardest situations, the hardest states of mind and existence? How do you stay motivated? Is it just like those 1 in 100 success stories that is just injects every bit of energy into you, or how does that process work?
There are two things that I would say to that. One is that I don't need perfection for success. I need somebody to have a better relationship with a substance or, harm reduction and still feel successful. If somebody, even if, for example, take somebody kind of a description that you could probably relate to, like if I was able to help somebody achieve sobriety for the years where their kids were young, maybe they relapse when their kids are a little bit older and they, go through another step in their journey. But if they were able to stay sober when their kids are young, that's still a win, right? Like it doesn't need to be perfection. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is the thing I said about holding hope. Just because they don't look great the day they leave doesn't mean they're not going to be great. I had a patient recently. I was at an event and this beautiful woman walks up to me and she's like, Dr. Swift. And I look at her. I'm like, no idea who she is. And she's like, you were my doctor. And I'm like, racking my brain. And then I think back and I was like, oh my God. I was like, this woman, when she met me, she hated me. She told everybody she hated me. She was like, she won't do this. She won't give me benzos. She's blah, blah, blah. And I was out the day she discharged and she told the physician that discharged her, she was like, I really hated her, but I think she's right. And she left and, she didn't go to rehab. She just did the detox. Like we ended up, I recommended, I said, I'm going to prescribe you antabuse. You choose whether or not you take it, all these things. She took it. She came up to me. She's like, I'm a year sober. She's like, I don't know if I wouldn't have been if you hadn't been so tough on me. So it reinforces that it's worth it, even in the low moments, to stay the course, because I might be planting a seed for a beautiful flower later. I just have to be hopeful. And addiction, listen, like it's like any other disease. Some things you do lose. There is morbidity and mortality associated. So you need to be realistic.
How do you deal with say walking out of the doors of your office and going back to your life? I've always looked upon people that are in the field of work that you find yourself in. My sisters are in the hospital system, nurses and therapists. And honestly, I don't quite understand it. I don't think it is something that I feel like I have the capability of doing. But how do you go back and live a normal, healthy life when you are doing this type of work?
It's really important to have the awareness of what I can and what I can't do. I can't change the lives of others. I can't make decisions for people. I can put in my best effort to have people make informed choices for their lives, but I can't control them. And once I've acknowledged that I'm giving up the control of others, I can't also absorb their decisions if they're negative. If somebody has made a choice, I had a young girl, she came in for an opiate detox. 5 days in, she's like, Dr. Swift, I'm leaving. I went through all the reasons why I thought that was really dangerous. I ended up giving her my card and I was like, listen, it's your choice. If you want to leave, you leave. I went home that night and I was like, oh, it just like, you just have this sinking feeling. You're going to get a call. The family's going to be like, we found her dead, like she overdosed or, or something. And I woke up the next morning at 5 a.m. I had a missed call from her and I had an email. She's like, Dr. Swift, I want to come back. And it was something that was just kind of eye-opening to me that like, even me going home and worrying about it wouldn't have changed the outcome. Either way, it could have been that call that I was worried about or it was this one. It wasn't going to matter. I have to worry about the things I can control. And I can't control other people.
Yeah. Do you feel like that was a skill that you had to learn as you progress in your professional and care journey?
It's definitely something. I mean, I used to train physicians. I ran the addiction psychiatry program. I was heavily involved in our residency program. It's definitely something that it's worth explicitly talking about because I do think you're right. I don't think it's innate. I think it's something that it's a skill we build and we continually remind ourselves to use until it becomes reflexive.
Yeah. I can't, you just said it, but I can't recall the verbatim, but I found it interesting that, you said something along the lines of like, I can't help them. And it's interesting, like you're in a position where from my perspective, like you are helping a lot of people. So can you kind of explain that? Cause I think I know now, like what you're saying about that, especially in understanding that. Well, the way I say it to people is like, I can never label someone as an addict. they have to get to that point.
Right.
So is that kind of what you're
Exactly what it is.
alluding to?
I can tell them, I can tell people all the options they have available for what
Yeah.
I do believe can help them. I cannot force them to do things. I cannot force them to want things. I have to just be able to craft conversations such that they are giving me reasons for why the thing that may be medically recommended could fit them.
Mhm.
Can't at the end of the day. If I sit there for somebody with an opiate use disorder and I say, take Suboxone, take Suboxone, take Suboxone, guess what they're going to do? I'm not taking it, Dr. Swift. The more they say it out loud, the more they're going to believe that. So I have to ask. I had this patient recently who was taking Kratom, which is like a buy over the counter or whatever. And they tell me they don't want to be on Suboxone. And I said, what's the difference? You were buying this over the counter. Share with me the difference between the Suboxone and this. And they couldn't. They couldn't. Yeah. And so it was, but they didn't want to take the Suboxone. So it was about developing a discrepancy between what they were doing and what they believed. Because once I was able to develop that discrepancy, then I could get curious with them about maybe this thing that they had been staunchly against, they'd be interested in. And he ended up taking the Suboxone. It was
I think
a problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that addicts become specialists at is like creating excuses and reasoning themselves into a manner of thinking. And like I was phenomenal at it, and I see a lot of my recovered friends who were the same way. And so I think just speaking, from how I reacted, it's like if you would have, well, I know when people really pressed and like pushed, that strengthened my defense, and that made me get more justification and reasons for the way I was going to do things that were my way, and not the way that someone was kind of aggressively approaching me. And that kind of ties back to your ability to, I think, connect. You may or you mentioned like being really quite talented with the difficult cases, which maybe physically larger men. Did you have any difference with how you approached like a woman, or was there, was someone else called in for that one?
Women are tougher than men.
Yeah,
they are by far. So a couple of things. One, when I was pregnant and was on the detox unit, and pregnant women would come in, they'd have a very strong reaction to me because the idea was that I was judging them for harming or, putting their baby in harm's way, which I wasn't, but they came in with that preconceived notion. So I was up against the wall having to dispel that. But now they see me as, when I detox moms, there's so much shame. And I do work hard to build the rapport that I am not judged. You did not choose to drink at your child's soccer game. I know that.
Yeah.
I have to sometimes explicitly say that to them. This isn't something that you woke up one morning and said, this is the kind of mom I want to be. And what I tell them, it's the hardest thing to get moms into rehab. Moms never want to go to rehab. And I'll say to them, listen, the child isn't going to remember the 30 days you were gone. They're going to remember the 30 years after that you were there. Yeah. Being intoxicated with your child is not being present. And it's worth 30 days physically away from them to invest in the 30 years after. Yeah. But women are hard.
I'll let that comment hang. No, that hits me. That hits me really hard. My oldest son was 18 months when I went in, and I will never forget. He was in his room. He was playing with some blocks, and I was just sitting there on my knees. And my dad was actually in the room too. And, it's just like, I can't believe that life has brought us to this place where I am being stripped away from him. And I mentioned the excuses before, and it's like everything within me was like, no, I can't leave my wife alone to care for this 18-month-old. Like it's too much. I have to be there. And like you can just look at it from kind of an unfeeling like investment standpoint. It's like those 28 days for me have given me a lifetime with him.
I just got back. I just got back from 2 days. So we live out in Boise, Idaho. Like I can see the mountains from where I'm talking to you here. And I took my son out, and it was the first time that he has like truly been away from my wife in his 4 years of life. Like he was a COVID baby, so we've always done stuff together. And driving away from Boise, I actually recognized like there is no way I could have been trusted with this experience. And I had numerous moments with him out there in the mountains, like introducing him to something that I love and cherish so much. And I see the joy in his eyes. And we stepped out of the tent, and it was moonless. It was early in the morning, and he was not prompted at all. He just goes, "Wow, Dad, there's 1,000 stars in the sky." And I mean, that memory has been just like written in my soul. And I would not have gotten that without the 30 days to go and to spend that time. I'm actually going to connect this to something that I saw on the Silver Hill website. You had mentioned something about it. You talked about planting a seed. Yeah. One of the excuses that I see a lot of times is people who do have older children even, and their shame is looking back at their time and just being like, I wasted it. I'm lucky. I feel lucky that my son was 18 months old. Like I do get a lifetime with him if I keep at this. How do you approach and just kind of help those people who might have older children where resentments are real both ways and hatred is real both ways? Like, how do you help them connect with like, no, this is still worth it to put the work and the effort in?
It's something that has to explicitly be talked about, because we can't change the past. We can only invest in the future. And exactly as you said, there is nothing to say that there isn't time that's worth it to be, and memories worth to be made in the future. And so the work we do ends up on dual parts. We work individually with the patient about the shame and giving themselves the grace to not excuse what they did before, but decide that the past doesn't predict the future, and that the events of intoxication and when you're in the throes of addiction, the things that you do don't determine the person you are. I just had this conversation with a dad. He's got 2 young kids, and he's coming out first time in rehab, and he's like, I cannot even think about the things that I did, the times I had them in the car when I was intoxicated, all those things. Yep. And I was like, listen, we're going to have to think about that. It doesn't have to be today, but we're going to have to process that and understand that although those things happen, they don't define you as a father. You don't have to use that to imprint the way that you interact with your kids in the future. But also, if the kids are old enough, talking to them about what behavior looks like for an adult that has an addictive disorder that's active, and how we can envision things going forward. It's the same reason, I've detoxed a 92-year-old. What's the point of getting sober at 92? Maybe you want the last couple of months to be good. Maybe, right? Yeah. Like there's never an amount of time that you can discount as being useful. And so that's a really important point to be explicit about with people, is that it doesn't matter if, I could detox a terminally ill person if they want to. Yeah. If they want 5 months of clarity and sobriety, great, I'm here for it.
Yeah. I think one of the most motivating and inspirational things that I see, and honestly, one of the reasons that I continue to stay involved with the rehab facility I went to and go to AA as well, is seeing the light come back into someone's eyes, regardless of what age. Like it is, I mean, 92 is amazingly on the extreme.
Detox them all if we can.
It's just incredible. But yeah, I have seen just like boyish, childish joy and energy come into someone in their 80s that had, 3 weeks prior just been so hollow. And it injects energy into me. And I don't need other people to maintain my recovery. But boy, that really that really helps. I shouldn't say that. I do need other people. Like the community aspect for me is really very important. But it is amazing. It's just, I don't know. I have told my wife, and I'm like trying to think of a better way to explain this, but I don't think there's much better in terms of perspective, joy, than a recovered alcoholic. Like I just absolutely love being around them. I love having them in my life. I think they are some of the most capable people in the world because they know how difficult and how hard it can be.
Well, it's about gratitude. They're grateful for what they have. It's not
Yes.
many of us, unfortunately, take things for granted.
Yeah.
And when you know how bad things can be, to be purposeful about having things, not every day is a good day, but celebrate good days, there's something to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And you had mentioned I'm gonna jump back to something that you yourself said you specialized in, but the co-occurring disorders.
Mhm.
Could you take a moment and just explain that? And I'm just curious. I know about it. I have not done much exploration or understanding myself. I believe I likely suffer from it, but I don't think anyone specifically explained that to me or went through the process of a diagnosis. Not that it matters, but I think it does play a part in recovery.
For sure it does. So when we say co-occurring disorders, it could run the gamut. It could be a major depressive disorder and an alcohol use disorder, a generalized anxiety disorder and an alcohol use disorder, or it
Mhm.
could be a bipolar, a schizophrenia. Bipolar is very highly associated with substance use. So very often we see these people that have struggled with substance use their whole life. They get sober and then all of a sudden they're incredibly depressed and
Mm.
erratic and irritable and all the things. We have one on the unit right now. And it's like, wait, when you dive back into the history, it's because he had untreated bipolar disorder the whole time,
Mhm.
which was dampened by substances, and the substances became that tip of the iceberg that everybody saw. But once that tip got chopped off and it wasn't there anymore, you still have to deal with everything that's underneath. Because if you hit something into that,
Okay.
you still got to crash.
Yes.
So oftentimes what we will see, and this is the way I describe addiction to family members, is addiction is not about the high. It's not about the thrill of intoxication. It's about distraction from the terrible thoughts, feelings,
Yep.
mood states. So in tying that into co-occurring disorders, oftentimes there has been some major depressive episode or generalized anxiety disorder that wasn't treated, that the patient has some other predisposing factor that they chose an addictive substance, alcohol, opiates, benzos, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And that became the way they coped. So I try and steer away from the self-medicating as a term, but it's maladaptive coping. They're coping with a negative emotional state in a way that's not productive.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we can't really see what's the chicken or the egg because some of these things start at the same time or
Yeah.
develop after. We just treat them both. If you treat them both
Yeah.
at the same time, oftentimes your results are better. Treating somebody with an antidepressant that has an alcohol use disorder isn't going to produce sobriety. So it's not like you could just treat the depression and
Yeah.
expect alcohol to recede. You really do
Yeah.
have to make a measured attempt at treating them at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really conceptualize or think about you get sober and then things might become amplified more so. Which just now looking back and thinking about it, I don't think that occurred in my experience, but like I could definitely see that being the case because like I say to people, I think part of the reason I don't struggle with urges or desires to drink is I actually didn't like the flavor of drinks that contained alcohol. I literally chased the effects, and the effects I wanted was reprieve from discomfort. Um, and so when I'm kind of grateful for that fact that it's like I can sit out, say next to a body of water on a beautiful summer day, and there's no urge for like, man, a beer would hit. The taste of a beer would be great because I hated the taste of beer. I wanted the alcohol and the effects from the alcohol. But yeah, it's funny, the chicken or egg thing. So I started hiding my drinking about 2.5 years before entering recovery. And part of hiding my drinking was I was making up and creating just things to chase. Like, oh, I think it might be manic depressive. Oh, I'm definitely dealing with anxiety, just like psychosis, like just kind of making things up to make people believe the behaviors that they were seeing out of me. And like the interesting thing is I sort of manifested that within myself. And then when I did have periods of sobriety, it was like, I mean, this is both from coming down from the booze, but also just like, I think the state of mind that I got myself in, I was anxious. I was wildly anxious. I was manic depressive. And I tell people, like, the scary thing for me was I could start on a drinking bender based on a high that I felt or based on a low I felt. I actually didn't I was trying to clip off the peaks of my feeling, and I actually didn't even like when I peaked high. Like, most people think like, oh, you're chasing the exhilaration and joy in life. And it was like, no, I didn't like that, which was a really weird realization for me to come to, is like, I was just going after sort of that numbness, more than anything.
And that's addiction. It's the desire.
Exactly. Do you prep people for the intense amount of emotion that they're going to feel after rehab?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
It is going out in the cold, completely naked, with the wind blowing, and an ice storm's about to start.
Yes.
You have to be real about this. Like, there is no value in me sugarcoating how bad it's going to be. I told this patient this recently, and he really liked it. So I'll say it to you. I told him his sleep was going to be terrible. And the next day he woke up and he was like, my sleep was really bad because I think it was like the bed, blah, blah. I said, it's not the bed you're in, it's the body you're in. Like, this is the problem, right? Like,
yeah,
you could put it in the most comfortable bed in the world. Your body's a problem right now. You're early abstinence. Sleep is going to be terrible. And he appreciated that, because the next night he tried to sleep somewhere else and he's like, it was my body.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, the other thing I've told people, it's like, it's felt like a dam got broke, and there is just so much water held back that just needs to rush forward. And it is the most, in early recovery, even today, the most surprising things will make me emotional. Like, not necessarily from like a sobbing uncontrollably, but just like, it gives you the feels, and the feels are new, and the feels are something that I had to realize I had to get used to, because I wasn't chasing the numbness anymore. And it's just interesting to hear so many people say, kind of like, God, I really hate these emotions, but boy, do I love these emotions as well. And so again, I just feel like that's one of those things. It's like, you go into rehab and you think you're just gonna magically get sober, and it just kind of, I don't know, that was my ignorant thought. So I know we're kind of running up on time here, and just kind of curious to hear from your perspective, like, looking at the landscape of the work that you do, if a family member of an addict or an addict themselves has found themselves to this point in this episode, and maybe it's a different message for each one, but what do you feel like you would want to impart on them and make known to them?
For the family members, my main and consistent message is get the information you need before you need it. So don't be scrambling to figure out how to help your loved one when they're in crisis. If you start to see warning signs, don't ignore them. Don't discount them. Don't believe that they're telling you they're manic depressed and they're psychotic and they're this or that. Be honestly curious about other contributing factors and do your research, do your homework, have it in your back pocket. Because the second that you, obviously, if it comes to light, it's one thing, but if they say they want help, be ready with what the help will look like. Because the things you find in crisis oftentimes are not necessarily the best fit. They're just most available. And for the person, we as a society, we have to do better with stigma, because the more that we create places and spaces that people can talk openly about their relationship with substances, the better chance we have at catching things earlier. As you said, 2.5 years before you went into recovery, you obviously knew there was a problem. You started hiding it.
Yep.
But 2.5 years to take that leap. If there was some opportunity for us to have more casual conversations about it, maybe it would have been a year. Maybe it would have been a year and a half.
Yep.
but it's the stigma that's a problem right now. So we as a society have to do better. So I try to do my part. I'm speaking at a high school tonight about drugs and alcohol.
Love it.
Just to capture the kids early, plant the seed.
Yeah.
Never know when it's going to grow into a beautiful flower.
I love that. Well, I can't thank you enough for the time here this afternoon, for sharing your story and your perspective. As you've hit on, addressing and just normalizing the conversation is a huge part of why I've built this and why I continue to have these conversations. It's I don't think there's anything quite as powerful as listening to someone or having a conversation with someone where you have that recognition and moment that you realize, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. Just all those shameful, judgmental thoughts can kind of be dissipated somewhat with that moment. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others who might find it impactful. And give us a rating through your streaming platform of choice. Ratings and comments help spread the work to others who are desperately searching for a solution. This simple action could have profound impacts on the lives of others. My hope is that my story can help those who feel alone in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and know that this life is full of abundant joy and wonder and is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you must endure. Until next time.